They saw something in me I didn't see in myself. So we need to be surrounded by people who are encouraging us and pushing us as well.
Welcome to 11Alive Uninterrupted, a program that brings you in-depth conversations with influential thought leaders and dynamic visionaries in Atlanta. I'm your host, Naima Abdullahi. In honor of Women's History Month, we are sitting down with former Atlanta Mayor Shirley Franklin, who continues her passion for public service to this day. Shirley was the first African-American woman to serve as mayor of a major southern city, and she's continuing her work in the community since leaving office. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
It's always been on my checklist to talk to you. So when I saw Women's History Month on the calendar, I said, I'm gonna hit up Shirley Franklin today.
Well, thank you.
You served as the 58th mayor of Atlanta, not only the first Black woman to serve mayor, but the first woman. How did this feel, this monumental moment back then for you?
Well, I had worked with Andrew Young and Maynard Jackson when they were both serving as mayor. So it was really awe-inspiring to me that I, in fact, would step into those shoes and have an opportunity to serve. In some ways, I was terrified, and in some ways, I felt prepared. And the combination allowed me to develop some sort of balance in my approach to the work, because my experience had been largely behind the scenes, really on the operational side of government and the policy-making side.
Was this the first time you ran for a position?
It was the first time I'd run for office.
Okay.
For political office. I'd never run for any office.
So this was a huge first step.
It was a big first step.
And the preparation that went into it, you know, let's talk about the two previous administrations that you were a part of, which were landmark administrations for the city of Atlanta. In '78, you served as mayor, Maynard Jackson's administration as Commissioner of Cultural Affairs. And then once Andrew Young got into office, you were also appointed to join his team. What was it like, two world-class leaders as your mentors?
Well, fortunately, both Maynard and Andy saw as part of their work and their public service, their community service was mentoring. So I'm one of hundreds, thousands of people who were mentored. And they were really pretty direct with us about what they expected, why they were serving, how they were serving. And they also gave us tremendous opportunities to kind of test our wings. Andy had a no-fault analysis policy when it came to making mistakes. He wanted us to push the envelope, and he wanted us to try new things. So he was always there really to back us up and to give us counsel along the way. Maynard was much younger than Andy when he served. Maynard was in his 30s. He was so robust in his support.
Right.
And I use the word robust because he had so much energy around the ideas, whether it was the right place for women and men of color and women of all backgrounds to serve in key positions. I mean, he was really just very strong on what we now call DEI and inclusion and diversity. Did
he realize how much of an impact he was making, just, you know, not only being the first Black mayor of Atlanta, but just that landmark administration and how it set the tone with the cultural shift that we were seeing in the city as far as leadership?
I actually think Maynard did. And the people who were closest to him, and I'm not counting myself, but there were many people, a dozen or so folks whose names I could name and offer today. I mean, they knew that they were charting a new course. The city of Atlanta was moving from what is traditionally called a weak mayor, where the council was primarily in charge, to a strong mayor. And Maynard was the youngest, the first African American, and also the first strong mayor. So he knew that he was charting a new course for the city. He knew that the city could be and should be an international city. And years later, here we are experiencing that with you and others who have moved to the city from around the world. He knew that it was the right thing to do, to have young people involved, to have community involved, as well as business leaders involved in decision making.
To see his leadership, to see Andrew Young's leadership, and you know, we also had another Black mayor after that, Bill Campbell, and then you stepping into your role, how do you say, you know what, this is what is going to differentiate me, not only as a leader, but as a woman as well?
Well, that's a big question, and I don't really know the answer to that.
It's good not to know, but I'd rather explore, you know, because that's huge.
But I will tell you that.
Because as a person who grew up in Atlanta, that meant a lot to me to see you in your role.
Well, part of the reason that I ran for office is because of young people like you. I had been to many programs where I'd said to young women, especially, you can do and be anything that you want to be. And then when I was approached by Andrew Young and Maynard Jackson and a handful of women and a few business leaders to run, I was thinking, no way, I don't want that trouble. I know what that job is.
Right, and what it entails.
I know what it entails, and I know a lot of times, you know, people are very upset with you. But finally, after the persistence of Maynard and Andy and a few other people, I had to face my own fear. I had to face the reality that I was saying something to young people that wasn't really true. And that if I was afraid to run, why would I expect them to step up? I ran not expecting that I would win. I really felt I was taking a risk, but I thought that in my 50s, that was the right thing to do at the time. And it turned out that I did win, but barely.
But still won.
Yes, I still won. I won without a runoff, which was pretty unusual in the history of Atlanta mayors. And I won by about 181 votes.
Outside of just the leadership that comes with the job, how are you able to balance motherhood, family? It's like, that's the part we don't hear much about, right? Because you're in this role, all eyes on you, public service, public figure. What advice did you get, whether it was from your mother, whether it was from another woman you looked up to, in the things not to lose sight of?
Well, the primary thing I say today, and as knew then, was that being mayor was a job, it was not life. So that I could not allow myself to be completely absorbed by the day-to-day operations of the city. On the other hand, I am the worst person to ask about balance. I don't do that very well. I never have.
Me neither. So yes, we have something in common.
I am, you know, full steam ahead, blinders on. Don't ask me any questions. Don't trouble me with any nuisance. I'm the worst person. So I really had to have family and friends pull my coattail the whole time.
And to help you along the way. Recently in the city of Atlanta, you received a huge honor from the City of Atlanta's Department of Watershed Management. The water supply program was renamed with your name. Let's really talk about the clean water initiative that you had started and you see the result of today. What was it like before and after you really launched that initiative?
When I ran for office, there were 2 or 3 things that nearly everyone that I met with asked me about. Number one is they were concerned about traffic. Still a problem. Number 2, they asked me about education, the quality of education. And 3, they asked me about the water system, because at the time the city was being fined millions of dollars for not meeting the clean water standards. When people ask me what are my accomplishments, I typically say the top 20 are water and sewer. Everything else, because those were really hard to do. The water system had not been overhauled in over 50 years. Now, 20 years later, people see the value of water and investment in water because they've seen both flooding, and they've all seen water shortage. We've seen Flint, Michigan. We've seen Jackson, Mississippi. We don't talk about infrastructure much. Most people who live in America today, railroads were already there. Roads were already there.
Which brings me to a really good point. Let's take the Atlanta Beltline into consideration. That was an initiative that was, you know, proposed during your administration. 22 miles, that is now a hot spot. When that conversation was really starting, did you guys see the potential of how transformative it would be for the city of Atlanta?
Well, the answer to the question is yes, once we understood what it was. But the truth of the matter is Ryan Gravel went to Kathy Woolard, who brought the idea to the city, and when I was elected, Kathy and I met nearly every week for 2 years, one-on-one. And at the end of every meeting, which most of the topics were about city operations, she would say, I really need you to understand the Beltline. And I would say, no way. I'm too busy, I've got budget, I've got water and sewer, I've got code enforcement, I have this, that, and the other. I don't have time for that. Finally, she decided to leave office and to run for another office. She came to the office with me that week and said, I'm giving you the Beltline. I'm like, I don't want it.
Why didn't you want it? Because your plate was full.
My plate was full.
Right.
I mean, I'm a very practical person, and I wasn't looking for another challenge, right? We had an airport expansion underway. We had a $4 billion airport expansion underway. We had a $3.5 billion water expansion underway. We had general operations. We were trying to increase police.
And here comes the Beltline.
And here comes the Beltline. So, because I trusted her, and we had a trusting relationship and still do, I said, okay, I'll take a look at it. And it took us over 2 years to figure out how to do it, before we even announced that we would. And we knew then, once we delved into it and did the research, and there was a group of people who, I will not take credit for figuring it out, a group of people who actually hammered through all of the problems and finally said, we can do this. What we can do is rails, and we can do trails, and we can do parkway, kind of a linear park. And we believe that we can set aside money for affordable housing and make it accessible to everyone. And maybe someday someone will be able to do light rail and transit. But we did not think we could do that 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago.
In looking at the potential of how transformative it would be, from what it seems, anywhere the Beltline touches, property value has kind of gone up, right? Where people along the Beltline, especially in the West Side, feel like they're being pushed out. How do we address or reimagine how we look at urban planning and economic infrastructure to make sure that Atlanta stays Atlanta, even though Atlanta keeps changing and is revitalized?
Well, there's no question that we knew it would be transformative. And there was no question that we knew that property values would rise. We knew that if we invested in infrastructure, and in this case, park and trails, that would increase the city's property values. What we thought was, and we put in place a requirement that 15% of all the bonds issued would be used for affordable housing. We weren't in office long enough to see that done. So that's there's an upside and a downside to term limits. The downside is we were not there long enough to really invest that 15% and continue to invest along the Beltline. I'm not blaming anyone else for that. Perhaps they weren't interested or tried, but in fact, there has been some investment on affordability. One of the downsides of the success of the city of Atlanta, even today, is it is very hard for people who are born into environments that are low income to move up the economic ladder. Now, you and I sit here, and people will say, well, you did it. Well, perhaps we did. But the fact of the matter is, just because 2 people can do it doesn't mean 2 million can.
Let's talk about Atlanta then and now via population. When you left office, the city's population was around 400,000 within the city limits. Now it's about 500,000. And in Metro Atlanta region, the population right now is about 6 million. Data shows that's a 50% increase from 20 years ago when you were in office. With the fast, unprecedented growth, how would you describe the state of the city right now? I mean, it's growing so rapidly. How do you take all of that in?
Well, I think it's fabulous that Atlanta is attracting people from all over the world. People are staying here once they are born here and educated here. So I think that's all fine. I mean, it presents huge challenges, though. And some of those challenges are the wealth gap.
Right.
Some of them are the transportation infrastructure that we have really not built as well as we need. We need to have far more rail connection across the metropolitan area than we have. There are historical reasons as to why we don't, but those should not be reasons why we don't now and moving forward. But it's very, very hard. Infrastructure is expensive and it's disruptive. And people want to talk about everything else. You got to do both. You have to do jobs.
Right. You
have to do education. You have to do healthcare. You have to do parks. But you've got to do that basic roads, technology infrastructure, water infrastructure, in order for a community to succeed.
What do we say to a younger generation that wants to find a new approach in bridging that gap, that wealth gap?
Well, number one, good luck. It's not easy. But number two, part of it means that we have to be concerned about community and not just ourselves.
Okay.
In other words,
what do you mean by that?
What I mean is, if we're only worried about where we're going and that we're not taking our brothers and sisters with us and paying attention to what's going on in a broader community, then we're making a mistake. So many people my age, in my 70s, almost 80 actually, are concerned about the cost of living. We live a certain lifestyle. We don't want to see that change. So we live in a state that espouses low taxes.
Right.
Well, low taxes mean low revenue. And low revenue means less to invest in education, healthcare, infrastructure. So during my term, I had to increase property taxes 2 times, 40% each time. I tripled the water and sewer rates. Tripled. 1, 2, 3. So the question was, could I get reelected doing those things? Andrew Young, Kasim Reed, and Maynard Jackson all talked to me individually about the water rates and the tax rates. And they were seasoned politicians compared to me. Remember, I was a first-time elected official.
Yeah.
And to a person, they said, be careful, because when you start to raise taxes or fees, people they don't like that, and you won't get reelected. All 3 of them, independently, with the exception of Andy, who said to me, if you're going to raise taxes, raise them high enough that you don't have to do it again.
Quite the advice.
Quite the advice. Unfortunately, the 2008 recession, Great Recession hit, and I had to do it again. And just before I left office, I had to propose raising taxes, another 40%, property taxes, plus water and sewer rates for the 3rd time, and advocating for a sales tax for water and sewer. So,
and the reason in raising these taxes, if you can say that as well.
Well, the reason is because that was the cost of the level of government that the public was demanding and that the city needed.
Okay.
So you have to cut waste, but you also have to identify new resources.
For someone who asks you today, what is a leader? How would you define that for them?
A leader is someone who has followers.
Okay.
And you have followers because you're able to capture the moment, the cause, the circumstance in a way that allows people to galvanize together to move forward. Now, leadership does not mean you're always doing things for good, unfortunately. And women serve in leadership roles all through our community, in our homes, in our places of worship. We don't often serve in executive positions in the public sector or even in the private sector as leaders, although we have all the qualities.
Right.
We are able to galvanize communities.
Right.
We are able to galvanize our family around a unified approach to things. There's something in the air, in the water, in the history, probably mostly in the history, that makes others and us think that we are not the right leaders.
But we have to fight that feeling to push through.
We have to fight that feeling, but my advice to young, I did not think I was the leader. I thought I didn't think so. And I thought that I'd worked for two great leaders and that I couldn't possibly do that work. But fortunately, they saw something in me I didn't see in myself. So we need to be surrounded by people who are encouraging us and pushing us as well.
What do you say to women since your administration who took mayoral roles throughout the United States who are continuing to seek more leadership after that? What message do you have for women who are either seeking that type of leadership or are continuing to?
Call me, I want to help.
Your line is open, your phone line is open. Thank you so much for joining us today at 11Alive. For you to pull up and sit here and just talk to me on so many different topics just means the world to me.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely, and we'll be right back. Thank you so much for tuning in for this edition of 11Alive Uninterrupted for the beautiful month of March, Women's History Month. We'll see you next time.